Welcome for those who are joining. Hello. I'll keep talking for a little bit while we all get started. Erin, lovely to see you again, Erin. It hasn't been too long. We've got a lot of people coming in today, and we are going to be recording today's session so that you can see it after the fact as well if you need to, or if you have to drop off, or if you have emergency in the background. See people in the car. Hi, Sarah. Nice to see you in the car there. People at home, people like myself with pretend backgrounds so you can't see the mess that sits right behind me. We're just going to wait another minute and then we're going to get started with today's session. We have the lovely Amanda here who's going to lead us today. I'm just scrolling through to see some more faces there. Lovely to see you all. Welcome. Oh, hi, Dave. Nice to see you. Good morning. Good morning. Is it morning? Not everywhere. It's not morning everywhere. Good morning and good afternoon. Okay, so I'm going to, it's 3 minutes past. I'm going to share my screen. All right, if I can see a lot of faces there, so can you just give me a thumbs up on the video if you can see my screen? That's working. Wonderful. Excellent. Tick for success with technology today. Welcome to our practitioner forum, which is all about elevating your business results. And it's going to be led by the lovely certified practitioner, Amanda Morey. And Amanda and I met about 14 years ago when she and I got certified at the same time or the same year. And she's a very experienced practitioner. She's had over 25 years experience in sales and operations in the technology and telecommunications industry. She's been a leader within organizations. And so what I asked her to do was share some of her experience or corporate experience in the selling and positioning space and expanding the use of whole brain thinking, because that's really what she was doing in the organization she's worked with. And she'll share some of that today. So I'm going to, don't move your faces there, but here they are, lovely faces. If you don't know me, sorry, for those of you who haven't met me before, I forgot, I've been with Herman for 14 years, but I've had some breaks in there having children. So if you didn't see me or meet me, that was probably why. Two of the little darlings now. We had a tough drop off this morning, but we're all good. And so if you haven't met me, hi, I'm Rosie, and I work with Herman on the team as a master practitioner, running certification and helping you guys be successful. It's quite a fun job. Now, let's get straight down to business. So a whole brain walk around of today's session. What are we going to do? We're going to look at how we go from buy-in to commitment. So it's nice that we have these buy-in conversations, but how do we actually get someone to say, yes, I want it. I want that car. I choose that car. I make that choice. We're going to look at the HBDI and how it plays a role in the sales process and how whole brain thinking impacts that too. We have an activity. We're going to send you into a breakout room. We're going to discuss it, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end and wrap up with our summary points. We've got 60 minutes. There's one breakout room. And if you have questions as we go along that come up, please capture them in the chat. Amanda will mostly be facilitating in a minute. I'll mostly be watching the chat and responding there, as well as managing the technology. Amanda is our lovely presenter for most of today, and you can connect with her on LinkedIn. I might even put that in the chat a bit later at the end. So if you want to connect with her, you can. If you want to connect with me, you can too. So why are we doing this? Well, we are successful when you are successful. That's the fundamental premise of how we work. And to make you successful, we want to share as many ways as possible about how you can use and apply whole brain thinking at all levels of business, really. You don't want this to be a one-hit wonder. You don't want to go and do a workshop. It's such a missed opportunity and go, yeah, that was a fun workshop. Nice to know about myself and someone else. You want it to grow and become bigger than that. So that's the why. Now, if you came to last month's session, I'm just going to recap because they sort of connect in some ways. Last month's session was about gaining buy-in, and I use the analogy of the gear stick in a car. Was anyone in that session or hear that session? So if you heard that session, I'm just going to do a quick recap. We talked about the sales process. Because I'm a psychologist, it's all about shifting your mindset, shifting the steps you go through in your mind. We talked about how selling is like changing the gears in a car. And so when you're trying to get buy-in and someone's in the park position, they've showed up, they're here. They're here to listen to you. That's a great first step. You actually have someone present. And so in the park position, it's like, yep, someone's there. And in that position, you do, the action you take is asking discovery questions. That's what you're asking. If you want to know more about those discovery questions, it's in the recording from last week, which you can access. Get in touch with me if you need to know how. In the drive position, this is the best position to be in a sales conversation. They're moving forward with you. That you're telling them something and they're going, yes, yes, that's great, makes sense. Okay, we're moving forward together towards an outcome. It's a great place to be. Sometimes, though, they're not there. Sometimes they're in neutral. And that's someone who's just thinking, I'm not sure. I'm not saying no, but I'm also not saying yes. I'm neutral. And you want to shift them into drive. So we talk about identifying any their needs. What do they need to move forward into that drive position? And then we have this fun person, the reverse thinker, the person who's moving backwards, who's saying, no, I don't believe this, I don't agree with this, or I want more, or they're questioning and they're actually actively retreating. And so that's often about the handling of objections and creating a safe space to align to that thinker or that person. And so we talked about how in the retreat stage, you actually don't bombard them with proof. Go, well, you're wrong, and I don't know where you got that information, and how could you hear that? That's not going to help you. If they're reversing, you need to align with them. And so we talked about that in the session. So that was just a bit of a recap from last time. What Amanda's going to do is now take that to the next level and how it's actually applied in real world business conversations. So I'll hand over to you, Amanda.
Hi, everyone. How are you? All good? I'm seeing smiles and thumbs up, so that's lovely. Look, thanks very much for having me along today. I started New Think in 2014, so I've actually done a lot of the thinking practices of HBDI and whole brain thinking through my consultancy, and I've also been running it within major corporates. So my last corporate role was head of operations for Nokia Enterprise in Oceania. And those sales are really big sales. They're sales to government for things like trains and roads and metro lines and mines to huge, massive tier one companies. So you can imagine how complicated some of those sales might be, how many stakeholders there are. So we go through, sales is a process basically, but it's a complicated process because organizations are complicated. By the way, I'm just going to excuse myself because if I blow my nose, they're burning off huge amounts of fire in my area today, and there's smoke everywhere. And so, of course, it would be today. But anyway, moving on. So sales is a process. And I think that a lot of people don't think about sales as a process, but it is a process. Albeit it can be very complicated. And it's not a linear process either. I would say that, while I have done it in this sort of cycle, ideally it would be lovely to be in a cycle like this, but it's actually not a lot of the time. And so whole brain thinking is actually really, really useful in the sales process when you think about the sales stages and the stages we go through. Like, in the initial contact and rapport building, it's all about who are the people that we need to speak to, who is making contact with us, and what are they asking for. And that's a very much a red activity, right? Trying to understand who those stakeholders are. Now, it doesn't really matter if you're selling and doing a one-on-one sale or you're selling to a massive organization. These stages are pretty much the same. Or even if you're selling internally to internal stakeholders within your team, the initial contact and rapport building is all about, tell me about what's happening with you. Why do you need this? And then you're going on to qualify that prospect right? Why are they seeking this solution, or why do they need to, what problem are they trying to solve within their team? And you're trying to qualify that information and understand their why. So as an example of that, just recently, on a team development exercise that we went through, the why for the team was they were a new team. They'd come together under a new department, and they really needed to start to work more effectively together. So understanding why they want to do the HBDI workshop and why they want to do the whole brain thinking workshop in the first place is all around discovering their why. And then, of course, you can give them a bit of a taster. You can give them a bit of a demonstration and talk a little bit about the solution. It's interesting, the last 2 workshops that I've done externally, they're both people who have done the HBDI in another organisation and then come into their organisation and gone, actually, this will be fantastic for my team, my current team. So, sometimes that demonstration thing, whole brain bingo is an activity in the platform that helps you demonstrate whole brain in a fun way. Thanks, Rosie. So that demonstration piece can just help people, I guess, move through the gear shift, I guess, if they are sort of sitting in neutral or park, you're trying to move them through to actually obviously doing something. We talked about reverse managing, and we're going to get more into a bit more detail of this, but that's often, it's about finding the concerns and the objections. And we're going through this part quite quickly, but we're going to delve into it a bit more. So then we follow up, and that's obviously a doing activity, and how do we get there, and what do we need to do to actually make this workshop happen, and when are we going to schedule it, and all those sorts of things. And then once we've actually done the workshop or engaged the participants and finished up, we actually then probably want to nurture them, follow them through the process, see how they're applying that, see how that's showing up in their work, etc. So that's one way to do it. But if you look at that and think about that in terms of selling externally, I've used this on customers multiple times. So the external in big companies, things like building that rapport with the stakeholders, qualifying and understanding who all the stakeholders are, qualifying and discovering is a huge component. And what's really interesting is when you do it in really big organizations like government, sometimes they're actually working against each other. They're supposed to be all pulling in the same direction. But what you discover is there's a third party over here, and there's another division over here, and there's someone else over here. So you have to go back to this initial rapport and rapport building step before you can actually move forward. So you're actually using the HBDI process on the discovery in the sale, if that makes sense. Not just, and this is not just if you're trying to sell a workshop, it's actually if you were trying to make a sale to a customer, how would you use HBDI? Any questions so far? No? Clear as mud. Okay, let's move on. So, what does sales mean to you? And who, I guess? Who are you selling to? So I'd like you to pop that in the chat. What does sales mean to you? Because a lot of the people here probably wouldn't necessarily, well, I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to generalize, but a lot of people don't think that they're salespeople, but we're all salespeople, right? We have to sell our workshop to internal stakeholders, exactly, Penny. We may be providing solutions, correct, connection and problem solving, yep. Meeting needs, leaders with challenges in their teams, absolutely. So sales is actually building relationships, finding gaps in people's businesses, etc. And that is, we're all selling, right? Whether you're selling an individual profile or an individual workshop, or whether you're selling a product to a customer, we're actually all selling. Okay. Thank you for your answers. So every quadrant and every thinker has a strength. We know that. We have preference, but we also, I always think of our sales strengths, and particularly in sales teams, as their superpowers, you know. So I tend to tell them, okay, guys, what's your superpower here, right? And they say to me various things. So if we start off in the A quadrant, they say, oh, well, my superpower is I'm really good at understanding what the customer issue is, and I'm really good at understanding what they're trying to achieve. I know exactly what their budget is. I know a lot about what their philosophy, what they're trying to roll out technically. So those salespeople are coming from the blue thinker preference. Right? If we move to sales in the B quadrant, those people are usually thinking about selling as a problem to solve practically, but also every detail of the contract, every detail of the commercials, every detail in the statement of work. They're probably in procurement or one of those departments, and in government departments, they are responsible for our tax dollars, so we should learn to love them, because they're actually protecting us from managing the financial side, right? And articulating those plans in an orderly way. So they have to be actually able to take the information that they're being given and then turn that back around into, well, this is actually how it'll work. And that's really, really important. If we go on to the people part, of course, we have to know who. We have to know who we're persuading. We have to know what they actually care about within their organization. I often say to salespeople, and as a salesperson who does come from the thinker preference will do this naturally, but a salesperson who's in the blue quadrant may not do this naturally, right? Is what is their overall organizational purpose? What are they trying to achieve in their business? What are their values, right? Do we actually know what they care about? That is a really, really critical part of for a red thinker. It's a very easy process to go into a sales process and think that way, but for a blue thinker, not so much so, as we're well aware. And the last quadrant here is reading the signs or the potential change. So, there's an old management framework called PESTLE, which some of them, if you've ever been management trained in the old ways, it's political, economic, social, technical, legal, and environmental. And the people who are in the yellow quadrant and the thinkers who are there are really working, like they tend to do that exercise. They go, okay, what's the big picture here? How is my solution fitting into this, the future of my organization? How am I helping my customer to actually think differently about this opportunity or this solution? And what innovation am I bringing to them? How am I helping them move forward? So you can see that, as a strength, if you're a salesperson in each of these quadrants, they all bring a different lens, which we're fully aware of. And that also means they have blind spots. So I'll give you a quick example. I had a gentleman a few years ago, an incredibly successful salesperson, very, very blue thinker, almost no red. And however, very focused on his targets and made his numbers every year for like 5 years. So they promoted him, which was great, except he had absolutely zero red. So he became a manager and a leader of salespeople. And it was really interesting. We had a conversation at the time with the director of the business and said, you do realize, that rapport building is, not that he can't do it, because obviously he was selling to people and he was hitting his target. So he must have been connecting with the right people along the way. But in terms of managing teams, that was a whole nother kettle of fish. So we had to help him and augment his superpowers with a person who might be able to be more sort of team focused. And the way that we did that is we found a thinker who within the team who I guess was more aligned, and we gave them a business partner in HR, funnily enough, who could really help him with the team and make him successful. So a good salesperson, I guess always, a good person who's with sales may not necessarily be successful in another area, but there is a way to make people successful in sales by understanding where their differences are, just like any other thinking preference. So before we move on, what do you think, and maybe chuck it in the chat, drop it into the chat. Some of the frustrations are selling either, we'll do selling to blue people, blue thinkers. So what are some of the sales frustrations, do you think? Illogical info, yeah. If you're selling to a blue thinker, if your pitch is to a blue thinker, what might be a frustration? Insufficient facts, too many words, not enough detail, too much talking and stuff, stories. Wow, okay, bombarded, not direct enough, exactly. All right, absolutely. So, I mean, knowing our audience is great. We don't always have that opportunity, actually. It was interesting. Rosie and I were just recently talking about a situation where they were actually pitching a workshop into an organization and didn't know necessarily who all the people were that they were actually having to pitch to. So interesting, from that perspective, you have to really think a little bit more. So let's think about it from the green quadrant. If you were selling, what might be some of the frustrations of if you were selling into a green person? And again, just drop them in the chat. Not giving application, not enough details, still correct. No timelines, yeah. No plan. Not clear, yeah. How will it work? Yeah. How is this actually going to play out? Right. So if they can't understand that from what you've told them, they're going to be stuck in either park or reverse. Process takes too long. Yeah. Precise timelines, exactly. Specific guaranteed outcomes. I like that, Julie. In technology, there is no specific guaranteed outcome, a la 5G. But we'll believe that not. I think I always like in networks where they talk about 99.9% uptime, and you think, hang on a second, there's 1% that's not going to be up. 0.1%. Okay, frustrations from the red quadrant, if we could drop those into the chat. So what do you think selling to the red quadrant might be some of the people's thinkers' frustrations if you're selling to the red people? Red thinkers. Too many roadblocks, too much chat. Maybe they might be chatting around the wrong things. How will people find the process? Yep. How will people find the process? I really like that. My husband sings the B soul too. Yeah. Who will work on this? Too big. Focus on cost. Yeah. Yeah. Don't you understand how important this is for our people? But how much is it? All about how it feels. Yep. Does it feel right for our organization? Does it align with us? Fearful of impact of past tools used. Yep. Inauthentic. Woo. Let's make it genuine. Oh, I love that. Genuine and authentic. Okay. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, exactly. I think it's interesting. We overlook the relevance of stories for these people. The relevance of storytelling is like a really big part of capturing hearts and minds. So if we're and I think for a lot of red thinkers, and I put myself more on the right brain side than the left brain side. So, stories about why really resonate with me. But certificate studies to expand your ability to tell stories. Yeah, because I think one of the things is if you're selling to that group who are more on the right brain, that what they want is they want that connection, right? They want a connection with the why. So I'll give you a really good example of that. New South Wales Telco Authority are actually responsible for the mobile broadband 5G black spots program in Australia. And the lady who runs it, her name is Kylie oh God, what's her last name? I've forgotten her last name. She's the general manager of Telco Australia, and she has to pitch to government the importance of mobile black spots. And the way she does that is she talks about how her sons have more power in their palm of their hand through their mobile device with 5G than our first responders do in line of defence for firefighting or for emergency or for SES. And she really tells the story about how technology, because I mean, she's selling to people who are technologists effectively. But the problem is actually a human problem, right? The problem that they're trying to solve with the mobile 5G black spots program from Telco Authority is to give first responders the ability to have communications within the palm of their hand, the stuff that you and I take for granted every day in Metro. That's a much more powerful thing that say, gee, it'd be great to give the people in the bush 5G. Okay, so you can kind of see where this telling stories becomes important. Then we think about reading the signs of real or potential change in customer situations, our yellow thinkers. So they're talking about what are some of the frustrations for yellow thinkers? So we need to drop those in the chat if we can. Give me 2 seconds, I'm going to blow my nose. Limiting my freedom or creativity, lack of context, time wasting, not the big picture. Yeah. Yeah, love it. Don't get the why. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. How sustainable is it? Too safe, not allowing for other perspectives. Yep. Disconnects. I love this. Conceptual and visual. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the frustration in the sales process is if you're selling to yellow thinkers and you haven't connected the why for them, they will remain seated in there where they are. So, thank you so much for all your fabulous responses. That's awesome. Good thinking. We've got a very rounded group here. So these are the sales frustrations, you know, exactly, getting off track. So if you're selling to a CFO and we're getting off track and we're trying to build rapport with this person, we're not giving them direct answers, we're rambling about the cat, they're not going to be engaged in the conversation. They probably need you to start out with detail and probably a succinct sort of agenda about what you're trying to achieve. In the green, primarily green thinkers, if that's who you're selling to, you need to think about that they need detail. They need to know sort of the scope. They need to know what the timeline is going to look like. They need to know the steps in the process. They need to know who's going to be involved and how are they going to be involved. They actually want a bit of a plan, an outline. And even in the early days, you can generally make them feel comfortable by giving them a bit of a scope of, well, these are the sorts of things that we would be covering and this is how long it would take. I generally do this. I mean, you might have noticed Rosie put that up in the beginning. You know, it's going to take us X to do this exercise. It's going to take us this long to do this exercise, so that, you know, you're all on board with. For the people who are green, they're waiting for that. They're waiting for you to tell them that information. And if they can't get it, all they're thinking about, they're not listening to anything else that you're saying to them. They're just listening to, when am I going to get that piece of information that I need? Okay, let's go off to the red quadrant. So again, you know, some people, however, if you're selling to a red thinker, they need the rapport building up front. They want you to go for a coffee and they want to feel like you are a genuine person. You are authentic. You have something that is valuable and valuable to their people. So this is really, really important. This is where if they don't hear that, that's going to frustrate them. Make sense? And the last one is the D quadrant, where you've got, you know, boring old detail. You've just given them a really long email with step-by-step instructions, and it's all very, very detailed. And they can't connect that in any way to why they should do this activity. And they don't see it as something that is going to help them in their in the long term or for big picture stuff. Any questions about sales frustrations? I think we covered most of them. I'm sorry, I have to jump off. No problem. You can listen to the recording, Fiona. Okay, so whole brain selling is really, again, making sure that we understand who is our thinker, who are in our customer, whether that be an internal customer or an external customer or organization. And then being very cautious, as we always are, not to, I guess, box people into a thinking preference. Because even the CFO, who may be responsible for the budget, and be that person, or the head of department, or whoever that it is that you're actually trying to pitch a workshop to or sell a product to, they may have a budget, but they're also, the next best question is, why are we doing this, right? And they'll have a why, absolutely. So even if their dominant thinking preference is, tell me how much this is going to cost me, which might be all the questions that they're asking, or their dominant questions might be about the process, or their dominant questions are around the people. Wherever they're coming from, the likelihood is that they're actually going to have to provide proof or a plan, or engage people, or provide the why and the possibilities, regardless of what their personal preference is. Because we don't make decisions, often we don't make decisions in isolation, right? We make decisions in terms of we in consultation with other people. Sometimes you'll get lucky and that person will be responsible for all of them. They'll go, yep, I'm just doing this and this is the way we're going. But in more complex scenarios, perhaps not, right? So I always say the next best question in sales is why. So, I need this information because da 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 da. Okay, why? Well, I have to go back to the executive team and I have to make sure that they're comfortable with how long this is going to take, and it's going to align to our future goal. And that is a very different why to it needs to fit our budget. It's a whole brained why. Yep. Any questions about that? No, pretty straightforward, I think. Okay, so whole brain sales walk around. So, this is the shortcuts for you to provide this. So when you're thinking about your thinker, who you're trying to, either internal stakeholder, get them into drive mode, and move them forward into committing, this is probably what you're going to need to have to provide them in order to do that. The data, the knowledge, the features, the benefits, the finance, the budget, the technical, they're all really important to blue thinkers. As I've said before, it's not, you can have a blue thinker who is not just focused on this. They're going to need other information. However, they're probably asking you for this. How do you get them out of this and moving forward? Then you need to produce a plan. That is requirements, processes, schedule, contingency, and risk management. And then we're going to pay attention to the people. We're going to make sure that the people the right people are engaged. We've got the right relationships with the right stakeholders, that we actually have a communications plan. So this is really interesting. I'll tell you a quick story about one of our favourite customers at Nokia, Sydney Trains. You can imagine what sort of sale it is to Sydney Trains, very complicated technical sale around obsolescence of technical equipment that actually run our networks within our trains. And they were really struggling, the team, on why they couldn't get buy-in and move forward from Sydney Trains. Clearly, you've got end-of-life equipment, which is not good for us, the commuter. We don't like to hear that there's end-of-life equipment in a rail signalling network. It's actually, we want the railways to work efficiently and effectively with few delays. And so what we did was we went back and had a look at our stakeholder map. And we realised that there was a really big stakeholder that nobody had engaged, and they were actually a third party, and they were incredibly influential. So we had provided the plan, we had provided all the technical information, and probably too much technical information. But what we'd actually missed was a key stakeholder in the relationship, and they needed to be part of the process. So they went back and found those key people. So sometimes you have to take a step back to take a step forward. And once they found those people, they then went into the yellow quadrant, found out their why, they got that executive buy-in and started to move that forward. Yep. And that whole sale actually completely shifted. But they were stuck in producing a plan and giving them a technical solution and thinking that it was enough for them to move forward because they've got an end of life obsolescence. Yet it wasn't, because not all the right people were involved. I hope that's a clear example of why whole brain thinking can be valuable in a sales process. By the way, Sydney Trains have now upgraded the, I'll just give everybody's heart a bit of it has actually been upgraded, the network with the solution, and they're very, very happy. So that's really good to know. But it's also good for us, the user, at the end of the story, because it means that the trains hopefully run more on time. So now is your time to shine. Sorry, have to leave. No problem, David. Think about your sales context. Think about your specific sales context. And we're going to put you into groups, and we're going to give you some time to do this exercise. We've got about, 10 minutes, Rosie? Maybe? Yeah, 10 minutes. So you'll need to be sort of quite onto it quickly. We're going to leave the questions. What are your most preferred? Where are you most preferred, dominant, and least? So what do you need to do in order to build your sales process? Who are your stakeholders? What profiles do they have? Who needs to approve the budget? That's really important. But if you're not sure about that, who's going to influence that? What are you learning about yourself from these profiles? Any surprises in this? And what seldom or never describes you in your role in general and in sales? So these are the questions. And which behavior would you like to add or improve? How will these help for you to be more effective in your sales context? So we're going to drop you into the groups. I believe that's happening, Rosie.
Yeah.
I'm about to open the rooms.
Kate's doing it. Perfect.
Yep.
Kate.
10 minutes. Okay, I'm
10
opening
minutes.
the rooms now.
The rooms are opening.
I'll share the questions in the room.
Okay,
yeah,
thanks, Rosie.
And we'll come back in and we'll have a bit of a debrief. Thank you. Welcome back. I must admit, we had a great session in our little breakup group, and I'd love for a couple of people to share theirs. Any insights or anything that's really hitting home for the team? I have one Andrea, I will actually call on you to start, if you wouldn't mind just sharing what you just shared with us.
Oh, hi, Amanda.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, so we were having a great conversation about stakeholders and adapting our approach once we'd clue spotted their preferences. And one of the greatest revelations for me was that with the blue quadrant thinker, for example, being direct is not confrontational for them. It's actually a way to connect with them. And so that's been one of the biggest revelations over my 14 years with him, is how to connect with different thinkers and how to adapt your approach using the quadrants. And even though it's uncomfortable, it works.
Yeah, those of us who need rapport don't understand people who don't need rapport, right? So when they start speaking to you, I mean, directly, you kind of, have you ever got one of those emails and they just basically, it says, hi, so-and-so, these blah, 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 and that's it. And you think, oh, how rude. But that's them. They're not worried about how's your day going? Hope you had a great weekend. None of that. They're not interested, right? So it's really interesting how in the process you can and to, as you say, Andrea, it's not actually confrontational for them. It's the way they communicate. So once you understand that, it's like, oh, good, right? This is going to be okay. Anyone else want to share anything any sort of moments that they've realized stakeholder profiles? What are you learning about yourself in this?
Sorry,
I think.
can I
Go, Sue.
Yeah. So we were talking about stories and actually about how, because I was saying, although I'm a red thinker, I don't always, know the stories I want to share. But we were talking about how the stories, you can use the same story, but change the emphasis of the story.
Oh,
You know,
awesome. Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think all humans like stories, but it's are you including enough facts and figures, enough data in the story? Or are you focusing on the more emotional, feel good aspects of the stories? And actually, if you've got some good stories, you can tweak them to be more aligned with the person that you're speaking to.
100% agree. I mean, as I said, a lot of the organizations that I've sold to through Nokia were like, Optus, TPG. They're technical, but they have a story. They're the story at the end of that. Like, so you're selling them technical product to a technical company who's delivering a service to users, and there's a story in that. So I've always thought about technology as solving problems for businesses and users, because they're us at the end of the day. What does it actually do for us? But to sell the story through a different lens, is absolutely what you need to do. I think it's great. Very articulately put there, Arlene. Nice work. Anyone else want to share anything? Nope.
I guess
Okay.
I have to be careful because my stress profile is very different to my relaxed profile. So I'm far more effective when I'm not under pressure.
Oh, nicely done, Donna. It's a really good point. I mean, you just want to get that sale happening, and so what will happen is, you might forget to do some of the fundamentals, and we have to always be on the lookout for our I guess where we need to add information or provide better context or whatever the case may be. Okay. Terrific. Any other questions around the selling process? Either selling to internal stakeholders, selling to external customers? Any other questions at this point in time? No? Okay, let's move to the next bit. I think we've got another bit. So the key points here is, sometimes with C quadrant, a bit of vulnerability of your pressure point can help. Oh, yeah, cool. Okay. Maybe Arlene, do you want to come off mute and talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to demonstrate that the reason why some people are not the same, particularly if they are across the diagonals, and that may often be the person that they're having some challenges within the team, then if your pressure point significantly changes, you can actually say, well, here's an example. I'll show you what occurs in normal things, but when I'm sitting with you here today, because it's important to me, you may be finding these things around my thinking styles.
Interesting.
And I work in a field of leadership, so I'm big on having people encourage people nowadays, particularly, to demonstrate vulnerability to their teams.
Yeah, it's sort of the new thing, isn't it? Like, saying it's okay to be vulnerable as a leader, whereas it used to be like we weren't allowed to show anything in the past when you're just bulletproof, that is, so to speak. And no one's bulletproof, so that's interesting. Okay, thank you for sharing that. So a whole brain sales process enables you to understand the needs of your stakeholders and customers, and the clues in the customer behavior are there to help you avoid getting stuck in your own preference and pay attention to the customer's preference first. It takes practice and effort to recondition our brain to think in a whole brain manner. And we absolutely know this from when you're trying to sell, and if you're in the sales process and you're not connecting with the customer or you're not connecting with the stakeholders, that frustration is clearly something that they are you're either not providing or they're missing, and you haven't yet provided for them in order to move from either reversing or in park to starting to drive, right? All customers care about some things more than others. You need to address their needs and preferences quickly. And I would say the better for you and your results, and be cautious that you just don't address what you think their preference is, because clearly they have preference, but then they may have other. We all can think in all the quadrants, so they clearly will still need not only the evidence, but maybe then will still need the timeline, and they will still need to know about the other stakeholders or the executive team or whoever. So you can't just say, okay, well, I'm only going to provide them this direct, succinct piece of information and I've got them on the hook. That's not going to be enough in most cases. You are actually going to need to provide the whole picture. Next slide, Rosie. Listen and comment on what you see and hear. Try to learn to be an observing participant. While customers may ask, question or comment from a perspective, it doesn't always mean this is their preference. We've just covered this. So it takes time. The next best question is why. So, in sales, it's always the next best question is why. And it's a little bit like our old classic golfing. Why do you golf? I golf because it's the one time of the week that I get out with my mates, and I love to get back to the clubhouse and we catch up. Is a very different golfing purpose to I am keen to improve my golfing score each week and I track it week on week. The next best question in sales is always why, because it will give you an indication as to what their real preference is. Does that make sense? Okay, your primary job is to learn to be flexible, walking through each quadrant, looking for interest and energy is the key one. Energy, I love that energy. You'll see people sit up, lean forward, uncross their arms, go, tell me more about that. Go, they're all energy, engagement, lean in, all of that sort of stuff. That's sales. Better if we can see them, it makes it much easier. Okay, next one. So top tips: stop, think and ask, avoid rushing to conclusions or action. If you're in the green quadrant, where can be a bit of a problem sometimes, you go, I've got a plan and I know how to execute it, right? So avoid rushing in on that. Take time for reflection. Be observant internally and externally. What am I thinking and feeling? What am I noticing in the others? How can I use this information to reshape my response? We talked about reshape response in my team as well, which I thought was really, really good. As a couple of people shared that they had started out on a tangent, thinking that was the way they were supposed to be going, and very quickly realized, hang on a minute, this is not hitting the mark at all, which is excellent, by the way, and then had to reshape their response to kind of be more aligned to how the conversation had moved. We've got to be quick on our feet as thinkers and facilitators, as we all know. Okay, next. So for your action planning, maybe you just want to jot these things down. What insights did you gain from this module? Who do you want to reach out to? Is there anyone at the moment who you think, okay, I'm in this place and I need to be moving forward and I'm not quite sure how to move forward? Is there anyone who can help you to do that? What tools do you need to use or points should you remember? We also talked about providing evidence, like getting familiar, like Sue said, with stories, and having your stories, but then being willing to pivot those stories. And then I guess even with Herman's resources, there are quite a lot of case studies, which I think, you can craft them to different quadrants. So even though they're sort of a case study with a lot of detail, you can shape those, I guess, to come from different quadrants in terms of, you may not provide the case study, you may just provide the big points out of it from a case study that Herman has as a resource. Does that make sense? And in the next 30 days, I guess, what will you do differently? Have you got someone you're pitching to currently internally, or a customer that you're engaging with that you're going to try something a little bit different? Think about what potentially that might be. And I definitely come to the end of every workshop that I do. So after the workshop yesterday, presenting to a group of PhD scientists, walking away going, did I tell too many stories? Or was that, how did it go? I'm always looking for that feedback. Did I tell the right stories? Are there new things that I could have brought into place? So I try to do that after my workshops to sort of see how I can improve my actual own pitch and selling process, if that makes sense. Because those people are actually all going away from a workshop, hopefully with value, because I pitched it properly as a workshop. And they all got something out of that workshop, but then they're going to tell somebody about it. So I'm hoping that that person then becomes my next referral, and then I can work forward from there. So improving all the time, I guess, is where I'm at. Questions. Sue, you had a question. Looked like you had a question. Nope. Okay. So if you want to know more or have a discussion about how to accelerate team or individual performance, please feel free to reach out or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to help. As I said, I actually pitch my own workshops through NewThink, using HBDI thinking sessions. But when I was working in corporates, I was pitching internally and to customers. So it's just, I don't think any of us can say, oh, I'm not a salesperson. I think we're all salespeople. We're just doing it from our own quadrants in slightly different ways, connecting with our customers and bringing, I guess, what I would always say as our superpower to those sales. So yeah, I hope that was enjoyable and you got something out of it.
Thank
No
you,
problem at
Amanda.
all. I think I'm on time, aren't I? Oh, yeah, just a
Yes.
little bit over.
A little bit over. Thank you so much for that. Round of applause. If you need to jump off, please.
Oh, thank you so much.
It was wonderful.
Thanks for coming today. I really appreciate everybody's attention.
It's really triggered some interesting thinking about stories. And I actually think it wasn't part of the plan, but I actually think I'm going to run a forum on stories that sell. I think what we could do, in fact, is instead of me doing all the work, is actually tell you, bring your best story. I'll share a couple, but there are so many stories at different parts of the sales conversation. And I'd love to put you into breakouts where you could share these stories. And I'll think about a way how we could capture them. But there are just so many that come to mind. And I think increasing our ability to tell these stories and hear the stories of everyone in the room would be a really powerful tool to add to our toolkit. Yeah. So keep the lookout. I might be posting something on Facebook even, because if you've got a story, you think, oh my gosh, this is an amazing one, we might try and collate them, bring them together, share them in this format, because there is so much value there in hearing these stories. So keep posted. Thank you, Amanda, again. And I look forward to seeing you all here next time.
Okay. Bye for now. Have a great week.